Welcome everyone to Taxes 101. This is our free tax prep informational webinar for service providers that we are offering again this year. And we were just saying that we think it might be 15 years plus that we've been offering different versions and kind of delivery methods in person, online of Taxes 101. So I know some of you have been with us for all of the years. So thank you and welcome to those that this might be their first time. My name is Mary Jo Katras and I am with University of Minnesota Extension. And we are here to help support this webinar and really to help provide education to support the families that you are working with across the state. And so I am going to just briefly introduce my colleagues who will be part of this webinar and who will be presenting and sharing information with you today. And so we first have Aisha Servaty, who is from Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. We had David Langley from Prepare and Prosper. When we have Shawna Thompson from Lutheran Social Services. And so I want to welcome them here today. We have been partnering together for a very long time, like I said, and so it's just great to have everyone here. Quick housekeeping before I turn it over to Shawna to kind of kick us off is to please make sure that you're on mute, which I think looks like most of you are. And if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat. And we will be monitoring the chat throughout the webinar to track some of the questions that you have and some of the comments. We will stop and pause for questions after each, after David and Aisha present, but we will also be monitoring it throughout their presentation too, in case there's a question that we need to stop. But we will save the majority of the questions for after our discussion, for the discussion at the end. And as most of you know, this is being recorded as well. So, and we will be sending out the recording as well as the resource guide that Shawna is going to share about in just a minute, and the slides with you after today's webinar. So Shawna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
There's my mute button. Yay, I'm off mute. Hi, everybody. I'm Shawna Thompson, and I'm the Financial Counseling Program Director for LSS Financial Counseling. For those of you that have attended an iteration of this in the past, you know that I've been involved in this for quite a while as well. It's been a great partnership over the years, and whether I was a participant or presenting or helping plan it, I've been a good part of it for at least the last 10 years myself. So happy to be here, and my time is short today. If you've attended before, you know that we typically have kind of three kind of focus areas. And one of those is all about tax resources and talking to your clients about taxes, since most of you on the call are working directly with folks in your work. And what we've kind of done is kind of taken all of the resources and pulled them into a document that we're going to be providing to you. And it looks like Mary Jo just popped a link right in the chat. So good. So all of that is right there for you. And I'm just going to kind of briefly go over what you can expect in the guide. I'm not going to scour through it, but there'll be some financial wellness organizations that you can rely on during the tax time that you can share with your folks that you're working with. There's a whole section for resources. There is a section about talking to your clients about taxes and savings during tax time. So, we call that the money moment. So maximizing the money moment at tax time. David's going to go over this more in depth in his presentation, but finding free tax prep within our state. And again, he'll review that kind of deeper dive, but all of the information will be listed here in the resource guide for you. And then there's some other tax resources too that are highlighted at the end of the document. So yeah, so look forward to receiving this, or you can download it via the link that Mary Jo just shared in the chat. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to David. Yeah.
Hey, service providers, appreciate you all being here on behalf of the people you work with to learn about resources and ways to provide them with access to free tax prep, and also some things to know about that they're going to want to know about for the tax season, right? So I'm David, and I'm the engagement manager. I forgot to fix that in the slide, but I'm actually the engagement manager at Prepare and Prosper. And yeah, if we could go to the next slide, it would be great. So I'm going to talk about free tax assistance in this state. And there are a couple of different programs that the people you're working with may be able to access free tax prep. Now, my organization is part of something called the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, which you can see as a bullet point up here. And there are about 200 VITA income tax sites in the state. Prepare and Prosper is probably the largest one, but there are other ones that people can go to, usually run by nonprofits like Prepare and Prosper. So VITA is a federal program, meaning that we are training volunteers up to IRS standards. I'm actually taking some of these IRS tests right now, and they are not always the most fun to take, but they're rigorous, right? So they're making sure that people who are preparing people's taxes for free are doing it right, and they're getting quality tax prep, and they're getting their refund, and as much as their refund as possible. So that's one way people can access free tax prep in the state of Minnesota. There's also tax counseling for the elderly, which is usually through ARRP. Similar to VITA in some ways, like organizations offer this form of free tax prep as well. So know that some of your go-tos for in-person free tax prep are going to be VITA organizations. And I'm going to show you in one of these slides in a bit where people can go to, where you can go, or where the people you're working with can go to find these organizations, as well as TCE organizations. Next slide, please. So I already touched on this, but free tax preparation, and what is it? So there has been this pervasive belief in the past that if it's free tax preparation, it's not quality, and that people are not going to have their returns done right. And I'm here to tell you that is completely not the case. As I was saying, all VITA organizations, they're being trained up to IRS standards. We get these things from the IRS, and people have to go through about 20 hours of education and hours of tests to do what they're doing. So we're here to get the people you work with that wealth building refund for free, to have it done correctly, and get them that maximum amount done, maximum refund, right? So free tax preparation equals quality tax preparation, I guess, is maybe the takeaway here. And we want it to be free, right? We don't want people to have to go to an H&R Block, a Jackson Hewitt, any of these places that just exist to just upcharge people for returns that they shouldn't have to be paying for. Next slide, please. So if you want to find a free tax prep site, a great place to go is the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You can go to the IRS, but I recommend going to Mindor instead, because they're going to have very specific state stuff there. And you're going to be able, at this URL, you're going to be able to go there, and they should be up and running right now. So I'll shut down some of these, access to some of these sites, or where you can find them once tax season is closed, usually in December. But all of these places, you should be able to go there and search and get information on how to make an appointment, reach out to them, contact them. So that's a great place to go to find free VITA sites in the state of Minnesota. Next slide. Now, if the people you're working with don't want to go to a site, or, I'll be real with you folks, ever since COVID, capacity for all VITA sites has been hit pretty hard, just because of the service delivery model being based on volunteers and in person. If sites are filled up, there are other options that the people you work with can utilize to access free tax prep. So there's a couple of different organizations or places they can go that we pass on and recommend. First, there's myfreetaxes.com. That is a partnership between United Way and others, and they offer free file software that way. One thing I love to recommend is you can find IRS free file packages, which is a little different. This gets a little confusing, but it's different than My Free Taxes, but it's IRS certified free file softwares from certified by the IRS themselves. And a great place to find those software packages is, again, your go-to is MNDOR, Minnesota Department of Revenue. And here's this URL. You'll have access to these slides. This is a great place to search. And I like to recommend that partners go here to look for IRS free file softwares, because you're going to get the ability to file federal and state for free here, right? We don't want people getting into a situation where they're able to file federal for free and only to be upcharged for state. So this MNDOR site, people are going to be able to find free file software to file for themselves completely for free. The income guidelines for some of these softwares are going to vary. So it's going to be key for your stakeholders to check and see what their income is and if they meet the income guidelines to use the software, but know that that option exists. Next slide, please. And then a new trusted resource for you to know about for free filing is an organization called Code for America, who launched this awesome new site called Get Your Refund. And Get Your Refund is going to be similar in some ways to IRS Free File, My Free Taxes, but it's a simplified tax filing system. And that should be opening up too. So in the screenshot, you can see, I took this a couple of days ago, that they weren't open, but they should be open soon. And they coordinate with Vita sites as well. They're connected with us, but people can actually file us. Oh, can you go back? Thanks. People can actually file a return through this application as well. And Code for America is an amazing nonprofit. They work to make government processes, including taxes, simplified for people. So I really do highly recommend that you folks check out Get Your Refund, or recommend the people you work with check it out. It's a great site. Next slide, please. So sometimes people have to go to a paid preparer due to capacity issues at free file sites, or there could be some other things that come into play, right? So sometimes people make too much money. Their situation is out of the scope of free tax preparers. And that can be a case. If you are working with people who want to use a paid preparer, these bullet points come right from the IRS on just some tips on choosing a paid preparer, right? So just know this: if you have a stakeholder that asks you a question, who do I go to, right? One is, well, maybe obvious, confirm that you don't qualify for free tax preparation, but we recommend that people check paid preparers' qualifications. They read reviews of the preparer. They ask about service fees. They make sure that that preparer is accessible, so that they're not just there for a couple of weeks during the tax season, that they can contact them if they need to. Not oftentimes, but sometimes there will be things that you'll need to connect with a preparer about after you filed, right? And that they review any return that they have done before they sign. So with Vita, we're reviewing those things with customers, and customers are going to need to self-advocate for themselves at these type of paid preparers. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my organization. Again, this is mostly related to free tax prep. You're here for Taxes 101, and that's a big part of what we do at Prepare and Prosper. We provide free tax preparation financial services. We also provide free financial coaching through our Money Mentors program. People come into that and they've got a financial goal they want to work on. They want one-on-one support, and they want lasting support. So that's what they're getting with Money Mentors. They're getting that collaborative brain, that person who's there to support them, to be their cheerleader when things get stressful or tough, and just someone who's going to be there to believe in them for an extended amount of time. We also offer some banking products that are low fee and accessible in partnership with Sunrise Bank. So if you know of someone who has been turned away from other banks and wants to be banked and is looking for a safe way and a low fee way to get their return direct deposited, fair banking might be an option for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've already talked about this, but we work with hundreds of volunteers throughout the year who are part of that VITA tax program, right? And same thing applies here. Going to prepare people's taxes, review them, make sure they're getting their maximum refund for free and that it's a quality return. Next slide. So at Prepare and Prosper, and this is going to be true for a lot of other VITA sites, but we can help with most tax situations. There are some things that are out of scope for us, but we can prepare property, state, and federal returns. We can amend returns if you got them done with us in the past. We can do previous year returns up to 3 years worth of back tax credits if someone was due for those. If people are self-employed or they're contractors or they're sole proprietors, we can prepare their taxes as well. We're here year round, so we're going to be here for customers who have questions. We're not going to disappear right after tax season. We do have Spanish language capacity in our tax sites, as well as access to over-the-phone interpretation from the IRS for hundreds of languages. So we've got a lot of language in our tax capacity, in our tax clinics. And we also, if you are working with someone who doesn't qualify for a social security number, but needs an ITIN number, which is an individual tax identification number, we're certified acceptance agents. So we can help in that way too. Next slide, please. And echoing Shawna, that tax refund moment is absolutely a money moment for people. What do I mean by that? Well, that refund that people are getting, for a lot of us Americans, that is the most disposable income that we get at any other point during the year. And at Prepare and Prosper, when people are coming in to get their taxes prepared and they're getting that refund, hopefully, we try to leverage that to become a money moment for them. So we can work with them to open up a savings account to split some of that refund, to enroll and save through College Bound St. Paul, which is an awesome new program through the city of St. Paul, where they're seeding education accounts. We can open US savings bonds. We can have touch points with people about their financial goals and what they want out of their finances, and really just trying to plant that seed and have it just be more than about getting a refund, all towards building some financial well-being. Next slide. For our tax prep services, and this can vary a little bit across VITA organizations, but to know for your stakeholders, if they want to come and get their taxes done, the income qualifications are mostly what we're triaging by. So 35,000 or less for individuals, 55,000 or less for families with multiple definitions of families, and 55,000 or less for self-employed. Now, there are some weird scenarios where we can't prepare people's taxes that are out of scope for VITA in general. And a couple of examples of those are if someone has taxi cab income, or they rent property and they get rental income, or if they are declaring bankruptcy in the year they want to file taxes. Those are some of the more notable ones, but just so you know about them. Next slide. So tax prep with Prepare and Prosper this year. So our appointments opened January 19th and they filled up that day. So tax appointments are going to go quick this year. We're opening them in 2-week blocks. So the next time they open up is going to be February 7th. And here's my recommendation to you folks, if you want to refer people to our tax services. I recommend that people get on our website or call us 10 a.m. the day of that tax appointments open, and as much as possible, they can be Johnny on the spot, because those appointments are going to go quick. So again, the next time that appointments open is going to be February 7th. you can go to our webpage that's in this slide that's hyperlinked, and we'll post about that on the website too. So you don't have to remember that date. We're going to be very transparent and clear with customers and service providers about those things. But the way tax prep is working is that we're offering drop-off clinics this year with some very limited virtual appointments also available for people who just can't come into a clinic. And the way this is going to work is that people are going to either make an appointment online or they're going to call, and then they're going to fill out some online paperwork, hopefully before the appointment. If they don't, they'll do that at their intake appointment, which could last 30 to 45 minutes. And they're going to drop off their taxes. Masks are required. And sometime the next week, they're going to make an appointment they're going to make an appointment at that actual drop-off appointment, but they'll come back in about a week and pick up that prepared tax return. And our preparers will reach out to people if there are any questions or anything they need information on in between that time. So that's how drop-off clinics are working this year. Next slide, please. I want to make you folks aware of another service we piloted last year when we knew our capacity was going to be limited due to COVID-19. And this is the primary service we are triaging and telling service providers to recommend to people if our tax clinics are full and this is a good fit for them. And I can talk to you a little bit about who's a good fit for this, but we call this program Do-It-Yourself Tax Prep, and it's going to open up January 31st. And the way this works is that we have unlimited capacity to help the people you work with file their taxes themselves with support from us. So what does that break down to? 4 components. 1, we're providing link to free tax preparation software that we use. So we're emailing that out to people. We created a do-it-yourself tax prep guide that is reformatted for this year, and we think does a really good job of going hand in hand with filing your taxes in the TaxSlayer software for many different income situations, for claiming tax credits, for all those things that you're going to do when you file yourself. 3, we have live webinars and recorded ones for people who aren't able to attend live webinars, but we'll offer live weekly webinars where people will get to learn about the service, how to use the guide, how to set up their free TaxSlayer account. And the cool thing this year is that we're including an hour at the end of these webinars where people will be able to get started on their return in the software. We're going to have certified Prepare and Prosper tax preparers there. So people, if they get stuck or they have a question, they can raise their digital hand and they can get support and answers while they're doing their tax return. And we're not anticipating people necessarily finishing their tax return during this session, but it being a huge confidence boost, right up front. People can come to multiple webinars if they want. They can come to unlimited webinars. They're free. The last component of this is going to be that we are offering support on the back end in the form of a contact form that will either go to our direct email or a phone line for people who get stuck. So we're not just saying to you, throw your stakeholders out into the water or to the wild and do your taxes yourself. We're going to be here, but we want people to try, if they can, to file themselves. Now, who's going to be a good fit for this? Well, 1, there's income guidelines this year. Last year, there wasn't. This year, the IRS implemented some, and it's too bad, but that's kind of where we're at. So you have to make $73,000 or less to use this service. And that's just the way it is with the software. And then some common sense things, right? People who are going to be a fit for this are comfortable with digital technology, have some digital literacy, are comfortable being online, who have access to email and use it, know how to access it, are comfortable reading and following written instructions, and want to learn a little bit about their tax situation. So we can have a conversation, reach out to me. You'll see my contact information in a couple of slides. We can talk more about who's a good fit for this service and how to get your folks to it. But in this slide, you can see that there is a web page that people can go to, and this launches again January 31st. So know that this is a resource out there. And one last thing about Do-It-Yourself Tax Prep. close to 6,000 people filed with us, Prepare and Prosper, through this service last year. So we know a lot of people can do it. You just need that support and that confidence boost. Next slide, please. So I already spoke to this last year, a couple slides ago, but again, I must have missed this, but this is a duplicated slide. But if you want it 2 times in a row, this is where you can go to find other free tax prep locations in the state of Minnesota through Mindor. Next slide, please. Some things I want you folks to know about, and Aisha may touch on some of these things. I was in an IRS tax kickoff launch meeting last week, and the IRS is going to be hard put to it this year. They've got a couple million file return backlog from the past couple of years. And what they stressed to us, to people who are attending this webinar, is that it's really important that people file an accurate return if they can the first time, to avoid delays. So what does that mean? Well, one thing is that we're going to want people to e-file when possible, either through a free tax paid preparer or on their own, and that's going to reduce delays. 2, they're going to want to bring their correct documents, and we can talk more about what that is, but they're going to want to bring their documents and have those things correct if possible the first time. Next, if people got advanced child tax credit payments, or they received that 3rd economic stimulus payment, in their return, either if they're filing it themselves, if they're going to a preparer, they're going to be asked what that number was that they received. And they're not going to be penalized if they get that number wrong, but it's going to slow down their return. So taxpayers should bring letters they received from the IRS to their tax appointments that have those amounts on them, just so they're doing it right the first time and they can avoid those month-long delays. So on my end, that's what I want you folks to know about. There's my contact information. So we'll pause here for any questions, and then if there are none, we'll transition to Aisha.
David, it's Shawna, and I have a question.
Yeah.
So last year, my free taxes partnered with TaxSlayer to do the platform for the prep. Do you know if that's the case again this year? The only reason why I'm asking is because I had a former client reach out to me and say, I'm trying to use my free taxes, but it keeps, it's routing me to TaxSlayer. Is that right? And so I had to do some investigating to find out that was the deal. So I don't know. Do you any insight on that for this year?
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and my answer is I don't know. I can get back to you in a second.
Yeah, just let me know.
Sure, absolutely.
It's just helpful to be able to, so that people can know what to expect and not feel like, is this right? You know what I mean?
Right. Great question.
All right. Well, any other questions?
I have a question. This is Cheryl. I'm from Pica Head Start. Hey, David.
Hey, Cheryl.
I don't know that lots of people will have saved those letters regarding those stimulus payments. And so can you just repeat what you said about being able to substantiate that in fact you did receive the stimulus payment and how much it was?
Sure. I'll let my colleague Aisha opine on this in a second.
Okay.
But an alternative method that people have described to me is if they didn't save those letters, if they have a bank, or if whatever way that they've gotten those payments, if they can go back and check that payment history, like look up when did the IRS send these payments out, and then check their bank accounts or their prepaid debit card account history to see when that payment got in and verify it that way. So one way is on the front end with the letters, and one way is kind of the back end on the receiving end and checking your bank deposit history.
Yeah. Hi, Cheryl. This is Aisha. I'm a tax attorney. So for a 2021 return for 6475, I mean, if someone received their third economic impact payment, they're not reporting that on a tax return. It's only if they did not receive a third economic impact payment that they are reporting it on a 2021 return. If they received it, then they're not reporting it on their return. All the tax preparer is doing is being like, hey, did you receive your third payment? If you received a 6475, it'll say, yes, you did receive your $1,400 or $2,800 or $1,400 per individual. And they'll just confirm that with you. Did you actually receive that amount? Because if you didn't, I'm going to take the difference and put it on line 30 as the recovery rebate credit. And they're doing their due diligence and confirming that with you. And then you're hopefully not getting a math error notice from the IRS and the back end of things, you know, in the end results. But if you don't have the letter and you received your money, you don't need to be worrying about a thing because you're not actually reporting it on your tax return. It's only if you get it's really only, you know, honestly, if you didn't receive it and then you claim it on your return as a recovery rebate credit, but the IRS said, no, we did send you a letter and you did receive the money when you really didn't, that's only when the issue comes in, but that's going to be a rare thing. And that's when someone can contact a low-income taxpayer clinic or can reach out to a some tax preparers will help with, you know, audit assistance or math error notices, enrolled agents, or they can contact another tax professional.
Now, Aisha, I just want to clarify something with you. So I'm looking at this notice from the IRS, and it says one of these, it's in this newsletter, it says special care for EIP advanced child tax credit recipients. The IRS also encourages caution to those people who receive a third economic impact payment or advanced child tax credit payment. Taxpayers should ensure the amount they received are entered correctly on the tax return. Incorrect entries when reporting these payments mean the IRS will need to further review the tax return, creating an extensive delay.
Yeah, so I mean, your incorrect amount will specifically be with your advanced child tax credit specifically, because you're claiming half of the amount at least, and then any incorrect amount if you are saying I didn't receive an additional $600, but you actually did. But they're making sure, because if you receive a letter saying you received $1,400, but you claim the recovery rebate credit $1,400, they're telling you make sure that you're not claiming $1,400 as a recovery rebate credit when you received a letter saying you received $1,400 and you did receive it. So you're reconciling the two, but you're not listing it on your tax return. You're not listing $1,400 if you received $1,400. Gotcha. It's only if you didn't do it, then you list it on your tax return.
Thank you for clarifying that, Aisha.
Any other questions for David? Okay, if you think of any, you can put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that, but we'll turn it over to Aisha.
Okay. So I will get started here. So my name is Aisha Servaty. As I had said, I do not use pronouns. I'm a tax attorney. I'm with the Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. And so I'm going to jump right in here. I do want to leave time at the end for questions, so I might speak a little quickly. You will get the PowerPoint. I will say in our second part of this, I will basically be talking for an hour and a half about tax credits and deductions and different things like that. And so some of these I'll be going, I'll be talking about them again. And so you'll be hearing it. And so I'm trying to go a little bit more in depth in some different parts of it in here. So I'm going to jump right into the American Rescue Plan Act. That was legislation that was signed into law by President Biden. So that allowed for that third round of economic impact payments or stimulus payments, as individuals know them as, or recovery rebate credits, as they'll be on the 2021 tax return. I continued limited federal unemployment compensation, state and local government assistance. And then what's really important for us to be talking about is those expanded tax credits. credits. And so I'll be talking about the expanded child tax credit and kind of that reintroduction actually of advanced child tax credit payments. They actually existed about 10, 12 years ago, and then they were stopped. The child independent care credit that was expanded, the earned income tax credit that was expanded, and then the third economic impacts payment and the second recovery rebate credit. And so talking about a little bit though, the IRS response to COVID-19. And so if you were here for last year's, there's kind of, oh, well, the IRS kind of had a response to COVID-19, and then here's some ongoing issues. We're still in the ongoing issues phase to the IRS response to COVID-19. So the IRS still does not have all of its campuses open. The taxpayer assistance centers are by appointment only. There are 6 taxpayer assistance centers throughout the state of Minnesota, 3 of which are actually in the Twin Cities area. And so they are by appointment only. Appointments can go at about 3 months, depending on which center you are at. So just something to know. Taxpayer assistance centers are great because you can go in person, you can bring in your notice, you can bring in, if you need to, show identification papers for something like an ITIN and you can't get into Prepare and Prosper, or another tax preparer that it can certify things. If you need to go in and pay a tax bill, you can do those things in person, but you need to be able to get an appointment to do that. There's very limited telephone support. I know myself, I have been unable to get a hold of anyone at the IRS in order to help my clients. Very slow processing and delays in mail. There are over 10 million unprocessed 2019 and 2020 returns still, paper returns. So again, that e-filing of returns is very important. And notices are being sent with little to no remaining time to respond. So those deadlines that are very important deadlines, the 30, 60, 90-day deadlines, the notices are being sent out, and there are just mere days or no days left to respond, and taxpayers have no recourse whatsoever available to them as a result. And so jumping into that child tax credit, what is new for 2021? And I just want to note, these credits I'm talking about are for tax year 2021, and they are only for tax year 2021. There is no legislation so far that has expanded them beyond 2021. So if you have clients who are like, oh, so those advanced child tax credit payments or those special provisions, those have been extended, right? No, they haven't been extended. So they stopped December 31st, 2021. And so what the American Rescue Plan did is it increased that child tax credit payment for 2021 from $2,000 to up to that $3,600. So $3,000 for a certain age group, $3,600 for another age group per dependent. It made it fully refundable. So in the past, it was up to $2,000 with up to $1,400 refundable as the additional child tax credit. Now up to the full amount is fully refundable. It got rid of that earned income requirement, which literally makes it so every individual is eligible for the child tax credit if you have eligible dependents. It made it so that there were those advanced payments that made up to an equal amount to half of the total amount of the child credit available. So they did those through July through December. Now, every individual received their amount, which is why it's really important to keep your 6419 notice. It is also important to note through having a child tax credit update portal account, because it'll show you your actual payment history, and you need to align that up with your bank account to see, did I actually get those payments, or through the checks that you did receive in the mail, through check stubs, making sure it lines up with your letter to make sure that you then can reconcile it on your tax return. And so for dependents under the age of 6, so 5 and under, it was $300 per month per dependent. And for ages 6 through 17, it was $250 per month per dependent, because it did change that age requirement. So it was under age 16 for originally, that's what it is going forward now for the child tax credit again, but it was for 17 and under, you could not be 18 or over by December 31st, 2021 in order to qualify. And so there is this qualifying dependent test, really looking at really a qualifying child for the most part test. And I'm just listing this for all of the dependent credits that we'll kind of be talking about here. You have to meet any age or disability requirements, any income requirements that we'll be talking about, relationship tests, living with the taxpayer 6 months or more out of the year, or for the child tax credit, having an IRS form 8332 signed, which allows for filing status and child tax credit to be signed over from the parent who has primary custody to the parent without primary custody. The earned income tax credit cannot be signed away, though you must meet that residency requirement. The child must have a valid social security number for the child tax credit. The parent does not have to have a social security number. They can have an ITIN. That is the same for economic impact payments for the third payment. That is not true for the earned income tax credit. Every individual must have a social security number. You must be born during the tax year for which the credit is being taken. Also for the year in which the return is being used, that's on file to determine eligibility. For example, for the advanced payments, a 2019 or a 2020 return might have been used to determine those advanced payments, because a 2021 return isn't obviously available yet because it hasn't been filed. And so they needed to be on that return. And so if they weren't on that return, then obviously you weren't going to get an advance payment for them. The IRS was supposed to reconcile that to the update portal, but it never did. And then the child must not provide more than half of their own support if it's a qualifying child. Some client questions you might get about, I didn't get an advance payment, or I didn't get the full amount of my advance payment. Did you sign up for that child tax credit update portal or an ID.me account? So you could look at what the history was, whether or not the children were actually listed on your account. Did your address or bank account deposit information change? And you can actually look that up in your portal. Did your filing status change between 2019 or 2020 when they're using those returns? Was there a legal separation, divorce? Was there domestic violence involved that might have impacted who received the payment? What account was it deposited in? Do you take turns claiming children on your tax returns? And is that a reason why? Did your teen or older child file his or their own return, and as a result, in one of those tax years, so therefore you were not able to claim them? And did you paper file a return, and is it still being processed? And that's why you didn't receive your advance payment. Just things to keep in mind for questions to ask your clients, just one of many questions to ask them. And if they have further questions about it, they can always contact specifically our LITC, the University of Minnesota, which I do list, and which David mentioned as a low-income taxpayer clinic. They do not deal with the advanced child tax credit questions or related child tax credit issues. Our LITC does. So claiming it, you will claim the second half of the child tax credit in any unreceived portion of the advanced child tax credit on your tax year 2021 tax return. I want to emphasize that so much, because especially for those that there was no earned income tax credit for. So they might have used the non-filer tool, for example, in order to file a return, a simple tax return, or they just filed a simple tax return or a different year's tax return, and they're not required to file a 2021 tax return. And so they need to file a 2021 tax return in order to make sure they get the second half of their money. They're not done yet. It's not just the advanced portion. We want to make sure they get the rest of their credit. So if they're not used to filing a tax return, they need to make sure that they file a tax return so that they get the rest of their money and any unreceived portion of that advanced child tax credit. There's a lot of money on the line for a lot of people that, again, you don't have to have earned income. So for a lot of people that don't have earned income, this is a lot of money on the line for them. We want to make sure that they get it. And again, as I've mentioned before in that last question, you do not report your received advanced child tax credit payments on your tax return. You're only reporting the amount of money that you do not receive in your child tax credit that you're eligible for. So that second half of the money that you did not receive in the advanced portion, and then any unreceived amount. And so now I'm going to be flipping on to what is the child independent care credit. So they're payments that someone is taking care of your child or another person in your household. And so for 2021, it is up to 50% of $8,000 or $4,000 is what the credit amount would be for one child, or up to $16,000 expenses or $8,000 to be credit for two or more. And it is fully refundable for the first and only time of 2021 so far. So you can see the expenses that it is normally. So this is an huge amount of an increase for this time. And so what is it? It's payments to someone else to take care of your child or children, or someone else, another person that's eligible in your household. And so we're going to want to make sure that what are those requirements to claim? You're going to need earned income, so that's the money earned from a job or some other source of earned income, that you're looking or working or looking for work. It's specifically required that you have the filing status of single, head of household, or married filing jointly. Married filing separately, unfortunately, does not qualify you. And that you have the name, address, and the taxpayer identification number of the employer, or not the employer, I'm sorry, of the care provider. And that's actually really important because so many times I have clients that have family members or other eligible individuals that they pay money for to care for their child, but that person isn't counting it as income on their tax return. And so they don't want to get that person in trouble for that person not counting as income on their tax return. And so they don't want to give that person's identification number, be it, for example, their social security number. So they're not going to be able to take advantage of this credit, which is a fully refundable credit for them, because they don't want that person to get in trouble for not counting it as reportable income. So that is a conversation you're going to have with your client. So the person who cannot be providing the care is your spouse, the parent of the child, anyone listed on the return as a dependent. So example, an older child can't be taking care of a younger child, or your own child, age 18 or younger, regardless of whether they are claimed on your return. And who qualifies as a dependent is your spouse if they are disabled, another person claimed on your return if they are disabled, and a child age 12 or younger who you claim as a dependent on your return. So it's just making sure, again, that they meet that dependency test on the return. And some example of qualifying expenses, expenses for children below the level of kindergarten, for after school or before care, summer daycare, summer day camps, or some, example ones, incidental to care expenses, meals and snacks if paid separately are not, and camp supplies or other incidental expenses like that are ineligible. And so now I'm going to move on to the earned income tax credit. And so that has been particularly expanded for filers without dependents. And I just want to note the amounts. I'll be talking a lot about the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit in the second Taxes 101 on Thursday. I won't be talking as much about the child and dependent care credit. That's why I spent a little bit more time on that. But the one thing I want to note about for the earned income tax credit is the amount, because it's $21,430 for single filers without children and $27,380 for married filing jointly. That is a significant amount more than it usually is for filers without dependents. I'll be talking about the full numbers for filers with dependents on Thursday. It permits the use of 2019 or 2020 adjusted gross income if it's higher than 2021. That is similar to what they did last year. And for the first time, it allows married filing separately filers to be eligible. Normally, you cannot be married filing separately if certain conditions are met. And this is the earned income tax credit test in general, that you must be a U.S. citizen or resident alien. And this is where you, your spouse, and any dependents you claim must have social security numbers. This is how it is different than the other tests, that you cannot be the married filing separately unless you meet the test, which I do have on the filing slide. You cannot have investment income over the $10,000. You cannot be claimed as a dependent. And for your dependent, the age is 19 or younger. They must be younger than you, or the full-time student, or fully disabled. And for the married filing separately, it's just that you cannot have the same principal abode for the last 6 months of the year, that you must be claiming a child, and that you must be legally separated, or you can be legally separated under a written decree under your state law. So for economic impact payments, you'll be able to see the slides for the most part here. It's for 2020 and 2021. So for the first, second, and third, which I go through all three on here just as good reminders, because people can still claim 2020. As David mentioned, you can go back 3 years for refundable credits, and these are refundable credits. The economic impact payments were just advances, just like the advanced child tax credit. That's what economic impact payments are. They're advances of the recovery rebate credit. So you had to be a U.S. citizen, not claimed, have a social security number, and meet the adjusted gross income thresholds. They're not considered income. They are fully refundable credits. And so these were just kind of the baseline amounts. It was $1,200 for individuals, $500 for qualifying dependents. And then the idea of qualifying dependents changed by round 3 for round 1. And then it was $600 for individuals, regardless of whether it was the individual or a dependent for round 2. And then $1,400 for individual or dependent for round 3, with that dependent amount, which I'll talk about, the definition expanding to include 17 to 24-year-olds as well as older dependents. The income amounts were slowly decreased by who was phased in and phased out. And then the EIP was issued to the taxpayer claiming the dependent by the third economic impact payment. And then by the third one, a great thing was that on the second economic impact payment, for the first one, everyone on the tax return had to have a social security number. By the second one of the spouses could have an ITIN, everyone else must have the social security number. By the third one, the parents could have ITINs as long as the children had social security numbers. So there was a lot of good progress made, especially with the cross-section with immigration law. And then kind of determining your eligibility, it did differ with legislation like I just talked about, and with those kind of definitions changing. This is what it looked like. It was notice 1444 for tax year 2020, then notice 6475 for 2021. Again, I just want to mention those notice numbers. You know, as Shawna mentioned, a lot of clients especially won't have the one from last year if they're trying to file a 2020 return in order to get that recovery rebate credit or an amended return. Hopefully they'll have a 6475. They were just being mailed out by the end of this month, but a lot of times people will just throw them out because they're like, oh, well, I received it, or this is, you know, this isn't something that I'll need to be really applicable to me, or I'll need to necessarily keep this for my records, or this is from the IRS. This is scary. I don't want to deal with this. That's the majority of my clients. And so what they'll just need to do is, if they did not receive an amount, if they did not receive one of those amounts, they claim it as line 30 recovery rebate credit. Is the same line on a 2020 and on a 2021 1040 tax return. So it's a line 30 recovery rebate credit. This is the instructions from last year. It's the same idea with the notice number. You're just putting in the amount that you did not receive. So it's just emphasizing that. This is just, again, what if I owe the IRS? What if I owe creditors? If you owe the IRS for the economic impact payments, there is no offset. The IRS should not be offsetting for recovery rebate credits. They did offset in circumstances. They were supposed to refund back the money. The only guaranteed protection against creditors was with EIP2. There was no guaranteed protection with any of the other EIPs or with any recovery rebate credit. And the only protection against, the only use of against child support arrearages, EIP1 could be offset against child support arrearages. So can any recovery rebate credit, just like any refund can be used to offset child support arrearages. EIPs 2 and 3 could not be. And so these are, again, just some client questions to ask about. You know, if someone else claimed you as a dependent, if your address changed, or if you're homeless for a certain amount of time, you know, that might have been why you didn't receive your check. If your filing status changed, or if you had any change in relationship and the check might have gone to someone else, if you owed that child support arrearages, if you took turns, you know, claiming, and that's why you got a smaller EIP, again, if someone else claimed themselves. If your spouse passed away, then you might not have received their portion. There's certain circumstances when you could have received their portion under the amended frequently asked questions. There was a question about incarceration, and if they were incarcerated, they actually are entitled to economic impact payments, but they had to file the tax return in order to do that, a simplified tax return. So you'd want to make sure that they go back and do that, or you do an amended return in order to make sure that you get their portion of the economic impact payment, because it wouldn't have been automatically sent to them. And again, if you filed a paper return. And if you're looking for any legal help, we have Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's information. The University of Minnesota has a tax law clinic. That is their intake number. Volunteer Lawyers Network takes a limited number of cases. None of us help with tax preparation or filing. That is all VITA and TCE and paid tax preparers. I will note that For us, as LITCs, we do not take state only tax cases. We take federal tax cases. We will do states if it is related to the federal tax issue. The Volunteer Lawyers Networks will take limited state tax issues. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. That is my contact information. And I just want to reiterate our intake. If you have client referrals, please send them directly to our intake at 612-334-5970. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the PowerPoint. These will be sent out, so you will have all our contact information. And I will take any questions.
Perfect, thank you. I know we're just running up against time, but there is a few questions. So Sarah had a question. How much would you have to pay in childcare to receive a return for daycare?
So it would just be for up to the $8,000, you would receive up to $4,000 as a free fundable credit. So each money for money dollar that you're spending, you're getting about half. For one child, then it would be for two children, it would be up to 16,000, you'll get up to $8,000. So really any amount people are spending, they should be saving their receipts and receiving the amounts and putting that as a credit amount, because it is fully refundable and they actually are getting the amounts back. As long as it's for qualified expenses, that is the key part.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I thought there was a few more questions, but I'm seeing there are just comments saying thank you for how helpful your slides are and breaking it down. So like you said, these slides will be shared, and we will share the recording and the resource guide as well. I'm thinking that I will share the slides and the resource guide now after the webinar, in the recording later on, just so that if folks are joining on Thursday, they had some questions from today, they might be able to look at the slides and get some of that information. So maybe that will be helpful. Any other questions at all? We have probably about 30 seconds, 1 minute or so. We want to stay on task. We're very mindful of everyone's time. So.
And I just want to say too, make sure people sign up for the presentation on Thursday, because again, if you sign up and are unable to attend it or only able to attend a portion of it, we do again send out the slides and the recording. It is an hour and a half long, so I understand that can be a long time, but it is important information. So if you're able to be there for a part of it or able to sign up for it and then get the information that way.
Thank you for reiterating that. I put that registration in the chat a couple times, and like Aisha said, if you sign up, you will get all of the materials, even if you cannot attend. So thanks for reminding us of that, Aisha. Okay, well, I don't see any activity in the chat. Lots of thank yous. So thank you all for joining us today. This is such important information to have. And thank you, Aisha and David, for helping us navigate all of this tax year, and for Shawna for sharing around the resource guide as well. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay warm. I think it's cold everywhere in the state, so I can say that. And we'll hopefully see everyone on Thursday. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us to our contact information. I'll put it in the chat here, but it's also in your registration too. So thank you so much. Take care.